So we're now recording. So I am now with James Neward from Yorspace, and indeed from Design Dwell, and indeed in a very funky looking kind of OSB clad conversion job there. So James, do you want to introduce yourself and say what you're doing, and then tell us about the Yorspace story?
Yeah, hi Phil. Yeah, so my name is James Neward, and I am a co-founder of Yorspace, but very recently I've actually stepped down off the board, and I'm now actually an employee of Yorspace. That's the new transition for us. So my new role is director of operations at
Smart
Yorspace.
hello, James. Have you still not very
Still got the beard. But yeah, so and I've had a dual role in bringing forward Yorspace, in that I've obviously sat on the board and we've made strategic decisions, but I've also led on some of the my roles changed. My name title has changed several times, but project lead, client lead for Lowfield Green for that particular site, because that's the one that we've been pushing forward for so long. So
great stuff?
and I do have another capacity in this, that I'm a future resident, so I'm actually part of Lowfield Green Housing Co-op, which I'll come on to talk about of what that connection is between Yorspace and Lowfield Green.
That's how Yorspace came about. So my kind of first encounter with you is when you were looking at the building within Bishop Hill, but you had been going for some time prior to that, I think, hadn't you?
Yeah, so when we first met, and when Yorspace was being talked about, it was like 2014, and we set out to well, we've been looking around at a few different sites on the periphery, and sort of became aware of community-led housing in 2012, 2013, and Susanna Bird, my old housemate and co-founder of Yorspace, we were really inspired by the project in Leeds, which lots of people talk about. It's one of those sort of pin-ups of the community-led housing world, is Lilac, and low impact living, affordable community, and it ticked a load of boxes for us. I mean, my into this was sustainability. I've been working in sustainable architecture for many years, and to be able to not only live in a sustainable straw bale house, which is my dream, but to have all my friends live in those, and we designed them together and we built them together, and that was the in for me. And so we set about on that mission to try and find a bit of land, quite naively, like, oh, we're just going to find some land and make it happen. And then when you start to realize actually how difficult that is, and then you sort of unearth the housing crisis, because again, blissfully unaware of all that, just sort of, muddling along in the rental market, not really thinking about the future, mid to late 20s, kind of weren't thinking about settling down. So yeah, we were really inspired by that community, living as a community, and having shaped that. So when we first came across you, we were looking at Oliver House, which is care home that City of York owned, and we accidentally fell into campaigning to purchase that building, and then we went quite public, and then realized that lots of people were interested in this and the housing crisis. And one of the things we'll come on to talk about is the mutual home ownership model, and how that's like a new model of ownership and a new tenure that can hopefully, not on its own, but can be part of the solution to the housing crisis, to remedy some of the issues we have in the UK. So really, we set out to build a co-housing community. That was our aim, and then only having sort of won't have time to talk about it in full detail, but all those little things that you come across, the housing crisis, access to land, funding, churn of people, keeping them rented, doing this in your free time, convincing people that you're not lunatics and that you can do this, led us to actually set up Yorspace as a community land trust, as a vehicle to help. If I'll be honest, like all the people that were involved in the early stages, the early resident group, we were very quickly absorbing a lot of energy and knowledge, and we were like, well, hang on, we want to lock that in, and how can we do that? Or if it's taken us this long to do, what happens when the next James and Sue come along and want to build a community? Well, there's hopefully a guidebook here with lots of things what not to do in it. But that was it. So that was a very long answer to the question, but that's how it came about, really. Yeah.
And you used the word we. Who was the group, and has that changed over time?
Yeah. So initially, like I mentioned, Sue and I were neighbours at the time. My partner Susanna was part of that, but we lived on a street in Fossgate where there was a real sense of community that we kind of fostered there. We have street parties, things like that. So some of the neighbours were involved. We had, I would say, a local hero in the Bishop Hill area, and Pauline James was involved. Pauline Buchanan was involved, and so there's some people that were that were picked up along the way. So people that were interested in all of our house, people that were our neighbours, people that once we started doing these outreach events. So lots of people came to us. There was a real mix of people that were struggling to find their way onto the ladder, as they call it, but also people that were just really supportive of what we were trying to do and could see the issues that were happening in York. York at the time, we went launched, most expensive city in the north. That's probably still true. And so, yeah, it was a real mix of people interested in living there, people that wanted to give up their time, and yeah, it was a real spread of people, I would say.
Interesting. So what was the next step on after Oliver House once you started looking beyond that? And I know you did a community share issue, didn't you, once as part of that process?
Yeah, so we did quite a lot. When I was saying about we capture all that knowledge and experience, we 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 were doing quite a lot of work with solicitors, and we were getting grant funding, and so we started to develop ways in which we could make them affordable. And we were looking at the mutual home ownership model. We were looking at community land trusts and how they connect and asset lots, and making sure that if we go through all this effort and make it affordable, that it can't just be sold on in the future. So we went through a long process of mapping all that out, and then founding the community land trust after Oliver House. It was unsuccessful. I mean, we're very very publicly slagged the council off really about Oliver House, and so we sort of made just as many friends as we did enemies, I think, within the council. But what that did do was sparked a conversation, and then that led us to being able to have the conversation with City of York Council about what other opportunities there were, and so we were in the early stages of a bigger development, Lowfield Green, which was a 165 home development that City of York Council were leading on, for us to take over a portion of their self-build plots to turn it into a community self-build, because essentially that's what we're doing. So when that opportunity presented itself, we were able to access further grant funding, and lots of people were interested in mutual home ownership and that model, and also community land trusts getting that community buy-in, that community businesses, that community buying power. We ran our campaign, so we worked with the council. They helped us with the planning submission. We went down the route of appointing a professional team and getting all that going, but then when it came to it, we had to find a mechanism in which we could actually buy the land, and because we were trying to make it affordable, and a lot of the people around the table who were in the residents group couldn't afford to buy a piece of land, we sort of called on our community that we've been building up over the sort of 4 or 5 years that we've been going. And yeah, we ran a share off, which was an opportunity for people to invest in the community benefit society that we built, which was the vehicle that we used for our community land trust. We ran a campaign which is actually around the idea of the community bank of mum and dad. That was it really. Not that, lots of issues with access to housing is actually the deposit, not so much the monthly repayments. And so yeah, so we ran that share off in 2019. At the time, I think it's been beaten recently in the last 6 to 7 months. Was the national record for a community share offer raise for a community benefit society in the UK, which is amazing. I mean, blown away that we got that support, £422,000, yeah, and we were all ready to go. It was quite exciting. We were all geared up.
The kind of, that was all years ago, and there's that support from the council and grant funding and the community share. Why aren't you there now? Finished.
Well, yeah, there's a few things. There was. We obviously went through that period of unprecedented times, and I don't know if you've heard about this Brexit thing. But
I heard rumours of things behind the scenes. Yes.
So yeah, I mean, there's several factors, and we have unfortunately hit the perfect storm. And when we closed our share offer in January 2020, we had all the designs built up. We had the builder lined up. We've been working with them for a good 18 months, and a catalogue of events, mainly COVID-19, but also government's not renewing funding schemes, probably because of COVID-19, and then obviously all the price rises and stuff. So we end up in a situation where actually our builder that we work with went bust, with another element and impact of COVID, and then build costs have continued to rise. The energy crisis has exacerbated it, and most recently the latest thing is the interest rate rise. So we've had a real long list of things that were problematic, and it's a real shame because, like I say, in hindsight, sometimes we should have just gone in at certain points, but because our aim was to make things affordable, and there was people part of the housing co-op who'd been putting years of their life into making this happen, for them to be priced out, it felt like we owed a duty to try and find an alternative funding stream. So we spent a good 3 years trying to plug that funding gap, all the while all the prices have gone up, which meant that we needed to get more and more funding. And it's like it's like chasing a balloon in many ways. And yeah,
So
we just need to find an air rifle to shoot that balloon.
yeah, there are many things. But have you got to the point now where you? I've got, I guess, two questions. One is, have you got to the point where you think you can see a way of resolving that in a way that gets you on site and gets some people at least in homes on that site? And the second, I guess, is, which is the kind of follow on from that, which is, you talked about Yorspace doing something for itself, but also doing something for others beyond that. Yeah, do you? Has your energy pretty much had to focus in on getting Lowfield done, or do you still see Yorspace as having an ongoing role within the city in terms of being able to foster and support and be part of community housing beyond Lowfield? So on the Lowfield one first.
Yeah, so in terms of a route through, like I said, I mentioned the interest rate thing. I mean, that's the frustration is we found a building partner now who've been working with for a good 7 months now to develop an alternative way of off-site manufacture to bring our costs down. Got us kind of within striking distance of where we needed to be. So what you got to remember as well, Phil, when we submit that planning application for Lowfield Green, our costs were and that was September 2018. Sorry, it was 2.7 million, which is what we're looking at. It was about 1,500 pounds a square meter, which wasn't wasn't completely beyond the realms of possibility we could achieve that. But I mentioned we lost our builder when we went back out to tender. I think the lowest tender came back in at 4.4 million, and we'd lost this £900,000 funding. So really, it'd gone up significantly more. Anyway, but we found somebody who got our build cost to around about probably at about 3.8 now, which isn't a million miles away from where we need to be. But the interest rate rise is the latest thing. So we have a route through. We were for a long time, like I say, trying to basically deliver what we had planning for, and what we had planning for was wonderful, and it would be great. But we've had to take a bit of a reality check and realize that there's certain things we can't do, and now we are looking at phasing, and we're looking at potentially removing some of the communal features because they're basically a huge well, they shouldn't be considered this way, but they do feel like a large item that's I can't think of the word now, but it just feels like they're an extra bonus that if we're doing affordable housing, we should be stripping everything back. So our route through is to look at phasing, to look at removing those features. We have just applied for some funding. Devolution is on its way, and we've been tipped off about that. And so we've come up with a strategy that's based on a sliding scale of various amounts of funding that we may or may not get, which means that we will be on site this year. And we've had to and it's been hard, for people like me who've been involved from day one, to think that we aren't going to quite deliver this 19 home co-housing scheme. It will be a 19 home scheme, unlikely to have the co-housing elements, but there's other elements to it. So we hear back in about a month's time whether we've got through the first hurdle and how much we might get. So that's quite exciting. And then we are further contingency planning with various different partners, which is what we were intending to do this alone. That was the process. Obviously not completely alone with our consultant team and our contractors, but so that feels like the part of the reason why I've taken on this new role within the organization now is that we have investors that we want to ensure that if they backed us, that we deliver something. If it's not exactly what we set out to deliver, part of it might be. So that's quite exciting that we do have that moving forward. We also, at the risk of running before we can walk, have partnered with an organisation. We hear back in the next week on a second scheme. So to answer your second question around that future planning and then if it's helpful, I can run through some slides shortly about the mutual ownership model at Lowfield Green. But that really does stick to our original business plan that we set up post Oliver House, which is let's do more of these. Let's not waste that knowledge. Let's not waste that relationship we built with City of York Council. So So yes, we do have another scheme. It's a slightly different model. It won't be a mutual home ownership model, but it's still the idea of community land trust taking ownership of land, putting it to community ownership, no one profiting from it, and they're just building good stuff on it. And so that's where I think there's a real relevance between what's happening with Yoco and how we can support, you know, that on York Central. And you know, we've been on almost a silent partner in some ways, sitting and supporting Yoco in their venture, because it's yeah, that's how I think we can support in this. Yeah.
So picking up on I mean, obviously, you know, it's in our name, York Central co-owned. So co-ownership being a kind of key component of what we're trying to do. Could you do a quick explainer for how the mutual home ownership model works? Because from my conversation earlier today with Jim Reed over in Leeds, one of the things that came out of Lilac, which is kind of durable and we can think about how we reuse it, is mutual home ownership model. And it'd be great just to have a kind of, you know, real quick romp through how it works and how it allows different people to participate.
Yeah, I will. Hopefully, can you see this? Is that
Got that? That's brilliant.
brilliant? So, I mean, this really just gives that oversight of what I was saying about our model and bringing all those different stakeholders together. And you know, where it says here, buy land and lease it to mutual home ownership societies. That was our raison d'etre a few years back. We have slightly twisted that now. But yeah, I think the reason it was important for me to show this too is to communicate to you how the model works and how we've got two things going on, which lots of people don't potentially understand the complications for. It's complicated for the right reasons, which we've got that community asset lock of a community benefit society owning that land, and then we're leasing it to a co-op who can do what they need to do to ensure those homes stay long-term affordable. But it's also to say that our primary aim with this is to ensure that these homes don't find their way onto the open market, and that is the for us, that's the overriding aim and the ethos behind mutual home ownership. Some people can get quite partisan about the ways in which the money flow and how much people may pay and how it's distributed, percentage of income, is it, well, those kind of things, you know. But the way we see it is that we buy that land, put it into community ownership, lease it to mutual home ownership society, and they then ensure that those homes don't rise with local house prices, but rise with something that they fix. And in this particular case with Lowfield Green, we fixed it about 2.5%, which is used to roughly be inflation.
Yeah.
But regardless of that, that's what we've set it as, and that's how it's going to rise. So that's just a diagram to communicate that relationship really, and how we do it. To hone in specifically on mutual home ownership, and this is a little bit about the stages of development. So, you know, Yorspace buys that land, Yorspace and the mutual home ownership work together, and then post development it's all handed over to the mutual home ownership society. There is obviously a constant connection in that mutual home ownership society is sat on CLT or Yorspace owned land, but that's the sort of stages that we've gone through with it.
Right.
And so yes, so specifically to the mutual home ownership, the way that it works, and I can talk about this on a personal level because I'm going to be a resident there. So the way that this works for us is that we pay a deposit, which is 10% of the value of the property. The cost of the homes, by the way, is just what it costs to build, minus any funding. There's no developer profit that Yorspace are hanging on to this or anything. So our costs are basically, so when we're allocated a home, which in our instance is a 3-bed house, when we move in, we don't own that home directly. We become a resident member of the mutual home ownership society, in this case, which is Lowfield Green Housing Co-op. So we don't directly own the home, but we own the cooperative society that owns the home. So it's that really nice idea about, you mentioned the phrase co-ownership, that we collectively own those homes. And so we collectively make decisions on, for example, how they rise in value and what have you. So we own the society, and the society owns the home. So that's the fundamental mutuality.
Right.
In terms of how we own a share, so we pay a deposit and monthly repayment. So the deposit we put in, I mentioned 10% of the value, that goes into the mutual home ownership society, and a portion of that goes off to pay Yorspace for the land, the mortgage lender, and then we actually start accruing equity within it too. So a portion of what you pay as a resident member is you get back in equity, basically. So it's very similar to how a typical mortgage works. Yeah. The mutual home ownership society will have a mortgage with most likely will be our lender, which is Ecology Building Society, and we'll have that relationship with them. We'll have a development loan that Mutual Home Ownership Society will hold during the development phase, and then that switches and turns into a long-term mortgage. And actually, our most recent numbers are based on a 40-year mortgage to try and find another way to reduce the cost for the residents. So that's how it works. So you pay monthly, pay deposit, monthly repayments into the society. When you leave, you get that equity. So that's how you own a stake in the co-op.
Yeah.
When we change owners, so when you do leave, a new resident comes becomes a resident member. The co-op refinance, the society refinances, gives that resident member their deposit plus any equity they've accrued over time, and then they leave, and then the new resident comes in, takes over, and starts the process off again. The only slight difference will be from the original resident and the new resident is that everything will be slightly more expensive, but like I say, it won't be, like we saw the 15-20% house price rise we did during the pandemic. Over a course of a year, it's gone up to 2.5%. So that's very broadly how mutual ownership works for us in this instance. And I think this probably talks a little bit about that, in that this probably talks a little bit to some of the things I was saying over that. But in terms of the mutual ownership is responsible for the development mortgage and lease. So, the residents, when we move in, we have individual leases to the co-op. And we make our monthly repayments. So, like I was saying before, some of it goes off to pay Yorspace for land, some of it goes off to pay the mortgage lender. So that's the relationship really, and mutual ownership.
Brilliant.
I don't know whether we go. No, I think that's probably going into a little bit more about the ethos behind it, but probably stop sharing that point. But I think that's that's kind of it as succinctly as I can say. Like I say, there's very different.
That's absolutely brilliant. So, I mean, the key point there is effectively you own the mutual home ownership society collectively. The society owns the homes. So there's that break between the two. So you don't individually own the home, you have a lease on it. And as you say, that it's that really kind of, and the asset lot that's held on the land and the site, that means that it's forever affordable housing, which is that thing, that kind of mysterious, unattainable thing that everybody said. All the post-its on the wall back when we did my York Central about housing that's affordable but forever affordable. And so that device enables that to happen. It still enables people to take equity back out when they move on, but it gives you that setup, which means that housing remains forever affordable.